It's the 31st of August 2022. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show that never ends. Damn nuclear. It's crazy stuff. Hope everybody had a great day. It's a great day to be alive. I got a special story coming up pretty quick for everybody. My goodness, wait till you get a load of this story. It's the mother load. Always takes me a moment to get up to nuclear bashing speed. Meet scumbags, aka the IAEA, also known as United Nations, also known as the nuclear, or George Bush calls them New World Order. And Eisenhower called them the military-industrial complex. The United Nations has 195 militaries at their beck and call. Nothing good can come out of that. So the media has a hate on for us. For 80 years, it's been telling us that radiation made by man is harmless. It's like bananas and potato chips and walking in sunshine and getting on airplanes. Turns out that's actually lies. That's disappointing, to say the least. Another thing that's disappointing is Mothers for Nuclear, also known as Evil Mothers for Mass Murder. These people work for Diablo Canyon. And they shouldn't work for Diablo Canyon because obviously they don't know right from wrong. Just using the name Mothers for Nuclear, you can see farms, typical nuclear plant is surrounded by farms, on purpose to move the radioactive fallout to your supermarkets and your shelves and your stomach and your children's stomachs, so that they can end up in hospitals. How did we do on our video last night? We had 120 views after 1 hour and 47 thumbs up. It was an hour, 41, 21 seconds. At 12 hours, it was 166 views with 49 thumbs up. 15 hours, it was 51 thumbs up, which it is currently now. I had a total of 4 thumbs up in the last 22 hours. I've actually never seen anything that low in a decade, maybe, or something like that. So they froze my videos. They've been doing, I noticed, for the last week. They also, after 12 hours, make my videos longer than shorter. So let's find out what the discrepancy is. We'll jump right into the show. 1 hour and 41 minutes. And versus current is 1 hour 41:30. Wow, am I seeing this right? So 1 hour 41:30, and currently it's 1 hour 41:30. So they didn't change my video last night. That's the first time we've seen that. But they didn't make my video longer and shorter, or shorter after 12 hours. I'm in actual shock here. My goodness. They must have been sleeping on the job in the last 24 hours. Let's look at our poll before we run head on into an amazing night of news. Should Mothers for Nuclear have to work alongside of the homeless at the Fukushima nuclear meltdowns? We got 19 votes. 90% agrees that the people that are promoting nuclear should go down and work at the nuclear meltdown. I think it's a wonderful idea. And I don't know why anybody would think different. Hi, everybody. Here we go. Strap yourselves in and hang on tight. We're off to a great story. Walk Against Nuclear Waste, third year in a row in Canada. Starts September the 1st in Ignace. My apologies if I butcher the names of anything or buddy or communities. I'm actually pretty good at butchering them, unfortunately. South Bruce, they're going to start the walk at the South Bruce Public Info Center in that community. And they being, as far as I can tell, will be the native community. And the person who's doing it, from what I've seen in my research, has the moral high ground. And is doing what many people should have done, and she just went ahead and done it. And this is her third year, very passive, and all she's doing is walking to raise awareness and try to have a conversation. And unfortunately, the industry will take advantage of people like her and the people that participate. Head walker Darlene Necan is inviting others to join her as she prepares to launch the third annual Walk Against Nuclear Waste on Thursday. The problem is they're going to put the nuclear waste in central Ontario in prime farmland surrounded by 70,000 freshwater lakes. Truly one of the worst places you could put a nuclear waste dump. Of high-level fuel, everything is vented. And what I mean by that is the fuel rods are still splitting the atom. It's vented all the way there. They won't start using it till 1940 or to 2040. And it'll take them 40 to 60 years to truck all the waste they want to truck. Why not build it somewhere where it's not in conflict with people? Why build it in prime farmland where everybody's farming and this stuff is vented? And why build it where there's 70,000 lakes in a pristine environment like that? Because they know everybody will resist it. The idea is not to put it underground. The idea is to keep it above the ground because they want it splitting the atoms into the environment. Nothing else actually makes sense, does it? They've been the Nuclear Waste Management Organization has, I think it's $24 billion for the last 18 years, and it still can't find this site. It's not trying. If I got $24 billion, I'll have a site tomorrow if I want it. It's actually that simple. Apologize for slurping. Mikhail Gorbachev has died at 91. Everybody must, if you're regular here, would know that I despise him. He destroyed the pensions and the patents of the country, not just dissolving the country. Failed to prevent the collapse of the Soviet Union, says one media. Another media says he steered the Soviet breakup, which is actually what happened. And he lived a great life after that. He didn't want for anything. He set out to revitalize the Soviet Union, ended up unleashing forces that led to the collapse of communism. They say Chernobyl is the reason the Soviet Union collapsed. His decline was humiliating, and he lived till he was 91 with lots of money and influence. His power hopelessly sapped by an attempted coup against him in August of 1991. He spent his last months in office watching the Republic after Republic declared independence until he resigned December 25th, 1991. And the Soviet Union wrote itself into oblivion a day later rather than save everybody's pensions. So everybody was thrown under the bus. In 1990, he won a Nobel Peace Prize, which was a fortune back in those days, of course, for his role in so-called ending the Cold War, and spent his later years collecting accolades and awards from all corners of Earth. Yet he was widely despised at home. And I accidentally put him in the middle of that previous story. I apologize to everybody. Walk Against Nuclear Waste. The Ojibwe nations has led the walk on Nisniken, rather, I should say, has led the walk on 2 previous years. This is the 3rd year. They will leave the nuclear waste management Learn More Center. That's disgusting. They got to Learn More Center in the little tiny community of Ignace. And they gave out about $1.8 million to the community. They're not trying to buy people off, of course. They can spend it however they want, but they're not trying to buy them off. They're trying to create divide, and not trying to, they are creating the divide. It's a well-rehearsed, gee, I'm having a huge issue there. So, they're going to walk several hundred miles over a few days to raise awareness that you got to have a conversation. This is Canada. Nuclear regulator allows Tritium Unlimited. This is from 2012 story by Gordon Edwards, who's a well-known person in Canada. But I'll show you some discrepancies that worries me. This story is over the top. This is over the top. This story is absolute madness. I'm going to bring up the calculator and explain to you how crazy the story. Canada has allowed a company that makes tritium lights get out of jail card, and they're allowed to accidentally release 34 million trillion becquerels a year or at a time in an accident. It's actually hard to wrap your mind around what I'm saying here. 34 million trillion becquerels of tritium 3H, not tritium 2, but tritium 3H. Now, natural occurring tritium, which is just has only been trace amount on the planet pre-nuclear age. I think the numbers were around 1,100 pounds in all the oceans on the planet. And at Sellafield and in the United Kingdom and La Hague in France, in just a short period from their mixed oxide fuel facilities, released probably 5 times that into the environment in just the first decade or so of operations. They've operated for around 5 decades and 6 decades, I think, for a Sellafield. We're just talking about the fuel facilities, not the nuclear meltdowns. That's the Windscale, or not Donneray, right? Which was also a fuel reclamation mixed oxide fuel facility, MOX fuel, but just Sellafield fuel reclamation facilities and the La Hague in France. And they're also, of course, we showed the studies and talked about this, polluted the Arctic from those Okay, and so natural occurring tritium is extremely rare. Man-made is extremely everywhere. A tritium light factory at the Peterborough airport released 104. This was how the story came out originally. Had released 147 trillion becquerels of tritium into the atmosphere in about 5 minutes. This was a catastrophic event. It did not become public knowledge until 2012. What was the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission doing? How is it even conceivable the population wasn't aware of this immediately? But that's how the story originally ended up coming out. Instead of being alarmed and galvanized by enormous radioactive releases, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission staff trivialized the event by saying that the release was far below derived release limits of 34 million trillion becquerels a year. A limit so astronomical in size, it's literally absurd. It's literally absurd. And so it is. I got to do the math for you. Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. I miss you folks each day, you know. We're actually like a family in many ways. We know each other for quite a few years. It's something really special when you think about it. Okay, I'm going to bring up the calculator on the external. Clickety click. All right. So before we do that, I got to bring you in. We're gonna use strontium because it's a big number, right? We're gonna use strontium. I'll bring it up for you. All right, here we go. Boom. So a becquerel is an atomic disintegration per second. That a Curie has around 37 billion becquerels. Some Curies might have 39 billion, some Curies might be 35 billion, but 37 billion becquerels, atomic disintegrations per second. All right. So how do you translate that into grams, ounces, pounds? So potassium, if you compare potassium in Curies, it's 71 10 millionths of a Curie per gram. Whereas man-made, like tritium and cesium and strontium, have multiple Curies per gram. But potassium-40, which is the deception they use on people all the time for 80 years, is irrelevant. It's like a firecracker to an atomic bomb in comparison. So if we use strontium-90, which is the biggest number, 140 Curies per gram, by doing that we're downplaying the numbers, right? So we're being very liberal with the numbers we're going to talk about. All right, so here comes the calculator. I'll bring my big head in there for something to do. Okay, so let's work out what that actually means in poundage. Because when they said it was an absurd astronomical number, wait till you see this. So you got 140 Curies and multiplied by 37 billion becquerels, which is 4.4. If you let's use 120. So you got 37 billion. I love clicking. Times 120 curies per gram, which is 4.4 trillion becquerels. 4.4 trillion. 4.4 trillion. So we'll clear that. We got 34 million trillion becquerels to work with. 34 million trillion. $34 million times trillion. I'm sorry, 34 million times a whole bunch of zeros. We know what those numbers are going to be. Did I get too many? Millions, billions, trillions. So millions, billions. I got too many zeros. Okay. Equals. So we're going to divide that by 4,440,000,000 divided by 4,440,000,000 equals 7,657,000 grams. So you're going to divide grams by 29 to get ounces. We're almost through this. And we're going to divide that by 16 ounces to get pounds. So you're talking about 16,500 pounds into the environment in an accident is considered not an issue. Did I screw up the math on this? So let me double check it. Because this is an absurd number that they have no... Because you're talking about 37 billion times 120 per gram. 120 curies per gram. Right, so this is a sickening amount of atoms per person, say, or all the species on the planet combined. It's an absurd amount of atoms in one area on top of that being released. So a curie is 37 billion decays a second times 120. Yeah, and so these people are insane. So according to the annual release, which they make up the numbers themselves, the sudden release of 147 billion becquerels of tritium was about 30% of the maximum allowable annual releases according to the license of 500 trillion becquerels per year. So imagine how many facilities worldwide are actually releasing that much legally into the environment of just tritium. There's 1,000 other isotopes you got to worry about. Tritium's brutal because it assimilates into everything readily, all species. A very permissible limit indeed, but the limit is 68,000 times less than the derived release limit. Are you confused? Congratulations. This is exactly what the establishment is seeking to accomplish, to the point of mystification. Paper below, written by Hendrickson's 3 days before it was discovered on April 12th, that the Shield Source Incorporation had been exceeding the licensed maximum permissional annual releases of tritium throughout the years 2010-2011 without the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission even knowing about it. This is just a light factory, folks. So when I say there's no checks and balances, this is what I mean. It's absurd. It's not absurd. It's outrageous. It's dangerous. It's harmful. There's no way you can't harm millions and millions of people by doing this. There's no way you can avoid that. It was then actually revealed that their tritium emissions was about 5 times higher than those that were officially reported to the Canadian Nuclear Non-Safety Committees, and about 3 times higher than the maximum permissible licenses annual releases specified in the Canadian Non-Regulatory Agency in Canada. 500 trillion becquerels per year. But the actual release is approximately 1,500 trillion becquerels per year. That the maximum allowable license, it's naturally in Earth. Now, see, this is really interesting because they talk about naturally formed in the upper atmosphere, which I explained to you at the beginning, right? Natural. That's got nothing to do with man-made. That's completely different. It's the amount of tritium that is naturally produced by the mechanism every year. The number is well known. Natural inventory is accumulated amount of naturally produced tritium found in the environment, excluding the anthropogenic man-made tritium from explosions, nuclear reactors, and the fusion reactors are going to just be absurd amount of tritium releases into the environment. It's going to be absurd, folks. Thus, the actual release of tritium on February the 1st, 2010 may have been closer to 735 trillion becquerels from a light factory at an airport, rather than 147 trillion becquerels that was reported. And this was in a 5-minute release and would have exceeded the annual licenses by an insane 40%, 47%. But what I mean by insane is it's insane they're able to release anything close to that. This industry is cuckoo and lunatic, folks. It's just terrifying that these people have no checks and balances. Not to worry, however, it is still way below the derived emission limit of 34 million trillion becquerels. 34 million trillion becquerels. Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission will never compromise safety. So they can cover up a big accident and say, no, that's just regular releases. And that's what they're actually up to. They know something that we don't know. Obviously, there's huge releases going on. If it gets found out, they're going to say, well, that's below the regulatory limits. Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission always keeps radioactive emissions as low as reasonably possible, achievable. Well, obviously, they're keeping it at lethal doses into our communities and our environment and our drinking water. So this is the paper that he was referring to. An absurd release limit for tritium enables Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission to cover up a serious nuclear accident. Right, so that was the number 3.40 E plus 19 becquerels. I showed you that number earlier, right? Oh, I didn't, actually. I made a mistake in the math. I had 3.4 E plus 19, so it's significant. It's the orders of magnitude larger than my number. Oops. Which makes it around 12 million pounds. Oh my God, it can't be that, can it? This is over 200 times higher than the total global natural tritium production rate, which is not, that's simply well, in becquerels, in pound each. And 10 times the total world steady state natural inventory of tritium. The numbers I got are nowhere near that, by the way. It was around 1,100 pounds worldwide pre-nuclear industry. Each year during the past 5 years, in theory, SSI could have emitted more than 10 times the world's current natural tritium inventory, which is different than man-made anthropogenic tritium. Had they done so, tritium levels in rainfall and in every water body in the world would have risen several hundredfold. Now, Canada had an accident in the 70s where they raised the drinking water levels to 44,000 becquerels a liter. To put it in perspective, California's limit per liter is 15. You know, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Not 1,500 or 15,000 or 150,000 or 15 million, but 15. Canada's limit was 44,000. So your drinking water in Canada is a disease factory. And when you start adding in this to the equation and extrapolate from multiple facilities across the country and the nuclear plants, we'll be lucky to see a bumblebee in 3 or 4 years. This would have triggered a global health crisis. Of course, that's what we're seeing, right? They call it the coronavirus. We call it Fukushima. Would have been a tremendous outcry from scientists. There's a pipe dream. Health professionals and civil society around the world. Well, the media only talks to the control opposition. This scenario, of course, is impossible. All the reactors in Canada cannot produce enough tritium for SSI to do this. The derived release limit is literally absurd. On contrary, actually, all the reactors in Canada, which makes you wonder, did they have a massive accident? But tritium is not a small part, but like when it comes to accidents, the releases are just enormous of many, many different isotopes. Canada's reactors make a lot of tritium. No responsible regulatory agency would accept such absurd tritium release limits, but they did. Canada did. But when it comes to tritium, indeed, when it comes to all environmental releases, radionuclides, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission is not a responsible regulatory agency. No, they were created as a captured regulatory agency. Incorporating absurd release limits and licenses is the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission way of covering up and trivializing radiation releases. It was clearly illustrated when SSI had a large accidental release of tritium gas of February in 2010. So incorporating absurd release limits and licenses. On February 1st, 2010, SSI released 147.25 terabecquerels. Terabecquerel is a trillion, right? Of tritium gas into the environment, gas, airborne, due to the accidental releases from the tritium fill machine, because they make lights that can stay lit for like 15 years or something. Action, which exceeded their weekly action level of 17 trillion becquerels, which is far below the license release limit of 34 million trillion becquerels per year, terabecquerels. My God. We've lost complete control of the nuclear industry. Well, Canada was captured by the industry quite a long time ago, right? Canada lifted the restrictions. of radioactive food from Japan, while 55 countries banned the food from 14 prefectures for a decade. So Japan couldn't ship the food anywhere, only Canada. And who enabled that? The same people, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. They're the reason everybody is sick here in Canada. Because they fill their supermarkets up with food from a nuclear wasteland nobody else on the planet would touch. That's what happened to us, right? That's why everybody in Canada is sick. During the February 2010 accident, it apparently only lasted about 5 minutes. Decided to get rid of the tritium. They figured out they can turn it into lights that are radioactive for 120 years, by the way. It's despicable that they actually sell this stuff. It's like the americium they put into your smoke detectors. When you think there's billions of smoke detectors, well, Dan, there's only a little tiny speck. Yeah, that pulses energy every second like you couldn't imagine. That if your child eats it, they get sick and die eventually from it. And that you put it into the landfill or incinerators and burn it and liberate it back into the environment because you can't destroy it. CNSC, Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, non-regulatory agencies, have refused to release the details of the release from 2010. So why would you do that? Why would you not release the details? And a way to assure the public the radiation releases, whether routine or accidental, are of no concern. For years, the Canadian Non-Regulatory Agency has used derived release limits in this fashion. So the Canadian radiation release limits, derived or otherwise, generally greatly exceed those for the nuclear facilities or equivalent size in other countries. In other words, Canada is so evil, it makes the evil nuclear industry worldwide look like schoolyard bullies. Chicken eggs, per se. So new draft operating licenses for SSI prepared by the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission staff for the Commission's May 2nd, 2012 public hearing on SSI still includes a derived release limit of 34 million trillion becquerels of tritium per year, unchanged for past licenses. All right. I apologize because that gets confusing. But unfortunately, I can't let you off the hook quite yet, even though that's the last one in the story. I got to do my math again. I can do it a little bit quicker this time. So you got 37 billion atoms, atomic decays rather, per second. Did I get that right? Yeah, 37 billion. So at 120 curies per gram, Dina, that's the right number, 4.44 trillion atoms per gram. Atomic decays per second. Oh, man. Per gram, right? Okay. Per gram, or per 120 grams, or per gram. All right, so let's clear that. So let's go back. Let's do it this other way. We got 34 million. Yep. 34, that's billion, Dana, get with the program. 34 million times 1 trillion. Million, billion, trillion. Equals what it's supposed to. 34 million trillion. You're going to divide that by 444. Oh, 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 oh. Right, so far so good. That's the right number. Again, I had never ended up with a 0. Look at that. I've done something wrong. That's all we can do. Let's keep going. I'll do it again tomorrow night, but this time I'll work it out in advance. Right? It's just because I don't want to spend all that time on it again. Hi, everybody. Here we go. To avert a nuclear war, we need new nuclear power plants. That's as desperate as the industry can. That's a new one on me. I don't think I've ever heard that one before. To avoid the nuclear war, we need more nuclear power plants. Blanket opposition to nuclear, coupled with net zero. And so they just throw these words out there as if everybody is aware of what that means. And I can assure you the average person don't have not even a small inkling of what the hell net zero actually means. That was a study done by Miles Allen. Hi, how you doing, Scumbag? Miles Allen was the physicist behind net zero. And so United Nations took that and ran with it. They were like, this is cool, we can use that to bludgeon the population. Another study that United Nations utilized was called was the global warming, which was Wallace Brocker. Okay, and these were selfish people who wrote studies I'll get there, bear with me. Hopefully. So there's four things they're using, they weaponized against you. It was net zero, which is Miles Allen. It was Brocker, Wallace Brocker. Then carbon footprint was BP oil. How can we bring your footprint down? The idea of a personal carbon footprint was popularized by a large advertising campaign, a brutal continuous advertising campaign of the fossil fuel company BP Oil in 2005 after a major oil spill, designed to blame the industry's issues on the consumers, the individual consumers. So carbon footprint was weaponized against the population. And then this creature here, James Hansen from NASA, he gave a 1988 congressional testimony for 15 minutes. He's the hockey stick scale guy. Remember that, how that originally went out from NASA? Hansen said NASA, folks, was 99% confident that the warming was caused by the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere where all their rockets for decades were to, and not a random fluctuation. So they were blaming it on you, right? Not what the real reason was nuclear. Explain to you real quick. Hansen's testimony was pivotal, turning point in the history of global climate change, and marked the official beginning of the global climate change policy debate. So climate change was James Hansen, BP oil was carbon footprint, Wallace Brocker was the father of global warming, and Miles Allen was the father of net zero. So that's the four that United Nations has weaponized against every human on the planet, and is your fault. And they got that idea from these four individuals. You ain't going to find that story anywhere else. To avert nuclear war, we need new nuclear power plants. An agenda, net zero agenda. And he shows a picture of nuclear power plants surrounded by farms. So all nuclear power plants are hemorrhaging radiation 24 hours a day through the splitting of the atom of the fuel rods, which are stored in the fuel pools. They're stored in fuel pools because they're hot, and they're hot because they're split in atoms. And they're so hot that they boil off about 120,000 liters a day in each pool. There's 1,000 pools worldwide, and each liter has trillions of man-made anthropogenic, harmful atoms of different isotopes in each liter that's boiled off. And the tall, skinny stacks, you see the tall, skinny stacks? That's where that's piped up through. And will Japan's ghost towns come back to life after 11 long years? This is a continuation, obviously, yesterday. This story is, as far as I can tell, just picking up speed. So they're going to move people back into a nuclear wasteland where 85% of the land, your community, is off limit. 85%. Because of high levels of radiation, and no idea when they might be able to fix it. Right alongside of 4 ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns 2 kilometers away. And they want people to move back in. Oh, and they're going to start farming, which they actually were doing in Akuma, 2 miles away on the other side of the nuclear power plant for the last couple of years, where it's still a ghost town. It's too radioactive to enter, but they got farms there. The industry's not insane. It's way worse than that. The government has lifted evacuation orders for the first time since the multiple nuclear meltdowns due to radiation fears. That community was a ghost town. Not fears, but actual radiation. It's not fear, it's radiation. The Fukushima nuclear disaster, which was termed the world's second worst disaster after Chernobyl, which was a 200-ton reactor. Mostly graphite. Each of Fukushima reactors are 720 tons. And decades cooling pools on top of both buildings, 4 buildings. 2 pools, rather, on top of all 4 buildings were lost. And 4 inventories of reactor cores were lost. Over 80% of the municipality designated as difficult to return zones. Has opened up a police box. So the police job would be to tell people not to come there. You're right alongside a nuclear meltdown. The government is insane. We're going to prosecute them, investigate them, and prosecute them. So please don't come back to this nuclear wasteland. That's supposed to be his job. He's like, I'm here to make sure people feel safe. Really? Is that what you're actually doing? You should ask yourself that question, sir. There are other challenges remain. The government will still have to decontaminate locations where people plan to return. Again, this is not borderline madness, but madness. It's safer to build a house at a nuclear dump in America than it is to live in that spot. And it's not safe to build your house in a nuclear waste dump in America, but it is safer compared to living in that community right alongside of ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns that has 11 years of accumulation of absurd amounts each day. Portions of the town, it's so crazy. Portions of the town have been reopened for habitation, are located near the train station. Japanese Fukushima apples and peaches promoted in India, which never allowed that in there before. Japan has a couple of major offices there and is now convinced the complacent or the corruptibles to allow in food from a nuclear wasteland. Heartbreaking, folks. The Japanese Trade Office has held an event in New Delhi to promote fresh fruits from a nuclear wasteland. The Japan External Trade Organization's office in the Indian capital. They must have paid off a lot of people. Invited people in the local food industry to the event. Yeah, it's cheap. Yeah, it's from a nuclear wasteland, but it's cheap. And from Fukushima Prefecture. A restaurant chef said the Japanese apples are much sweeter than the Indian ones. So whoever wrote this story is as kooky as you get, folks. Because that's their evidence that is safe. Imports will start from this harvest season on conditions that the apples are inspected and disinfected. So even if it weren't coming from a nuclear wasteland, spraying disinfectant on it before you release it into the supermarkets, that's pretty evil. That organization known as JETRO says it will try to find sales routes for Japanese food. And they have offices worldwide. That's the Japanese promotion who's been poisoning people worldwide for over a decade from the nuclear wasteland. Japanese harvesters might get more aid from Fukushima impact. So the fishermen already have a bursary of about $500 million set aside. The government's going to buy their fish if nobody will buy the radioactive fish and freeze it and then resell it later and get their money back. It's hard to be as evil as Japan. They got the upper hand on just about everybody worldwide at this stage. Japanese harvesters, aka fishermen, likely to have their livelihoods damaged by the planned release. Now they're going to call it treated radioactive water. But like if you filter the kind of radiation we're talking about, the filter goes into a chain reaction that hour, that minute or something. You're gonna fill the filter up with 1,000 different elements and fuel particles, and of course there's going to be massive amount of neutron in it. It's going to cause a chain reaction. It's going to reach a criticality at some point, right? You can't filter it because it's lethal doses after 20 minutes for anybody in the building because the filter has to be 12 foot thick to shield you. You're talking about 2.2 sieverts of just beta they're acknowledging per liter. You have to utilize the fact there's going to be alphas, neutrons, and gammas. It's not just going to be beta, my goodness. And so now you're talking maybe 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. So when you filter 5 gallons of that, it's an absurd amount of radiation we're talking about. And they're talking about changing the filter once a year or something. Like the whole industry is actually batshit crazy. Why even you can't change the filter. You can't filter it. First off, yeah, you're going to get some bioaccumulation into the filter, but you can't actually filter it. But when you put this huge amount through it, you will filter quite a bit compared to, you get just as much is going to escape the filter. But the problem is, after a couple of hours, if you get rid of the contaminated water and plug in fresh water, that's going to go through a filter that's thousands and thousands of sieverts. So when it comes out the side, it's going to be much worse than 2.2 sieverts per liter. Put that into context, a gallon of it if I had a gallon of it 20 feet away from me, I would be dead before I got this far into the show. Imagine, like, if you fill up any of the tanks on site with this stuff, you can't build another tank. And you can't get back on the site anywhere. Because you have this 1.4 million sievert pulse and gamma shines, X-rays, and neutron bursts for thousands and thousands of feet. You can't build another tank. The existence of the tank are to trick the population of the planet, 7 billion people, into thinking that they got it under control and that it's not contaminated the environment. But the radioactive fallout plumes contaminated the whole planet in 20 days. You can't see it or smell it or taste it or touch it or hear it or feel it or pick it up or throw rocks at it. But it 100% exists. Everything goes downhill when it rains. Resistance to nuclear power is starting to ebb around the world. Of course it's not. With support from a surprising group, environmentalists. And you know who he's going to point to? James Hansen and Michael Schellenberg. This change of heart spans the globe and is being promoted by climate change, unreliable electrical grids, and fears about national security in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Is what they're saying is the justification. So a war at a captured nuclear power plant where they're firing dirty bombs, 155 millimeter depleted uranium munitions, now is justification for more nuclear power worldwide. The public relation firms are just brilliant, aren't they? They can convince you that a duck's bum is its head, not its actual head, if they wanted to. In California, the state's last remaining power plant, Diablo Canyon, where mothers for nuclear are employees, is hilarious in an evil way. Last week, Japan's prime minister said the country is restarting idled nuclear disease factories and considering building new ones. And the whole world, mining companies, use the media to cause a fake bull market, which I covered, right? Several videos back, how outrageous that was. And they got all kinds of suspecting investors again to dump their money into uranium stocks, and 4 days later, the bottom comes out of it because they sold their stocks and stole everybody's money. So everybody's going to sell their stocks dirt cheap, and they're going to take the money they made and buy as many of those stocks as they can get to do it again next week or the week after. Backers, and they've been doing that for 11 years, folks. Robbing everybody worldwide. The media is completely out of control. Backers of nuclear power note that it is a source of emission-free. You can't call it emission-free. The fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation into the environment 24 hours a day, with decades of reactor cores stored in it. They're all splitting the atom. There's no containment. How many atoms do you need to boil a glass of water? Well, you can put 2 million atoms at the head of a needle and you can't see it. But each atom can make somebody sick in increments over decades, or an animal or a bird. And you got to have a lot more than that to boil a glass of water. So how many atoms do you got to split each day to boil power for 1 million homes each day? Those atoms are released now into the environment each day because there's no containment, because they're in a fuel pool. There's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide doing the same thing. And there's decades of reactor cores in each of the pools because they don't have a repository anywhere on the planet. So using Michael Schellenberg, a nuclear lobbyist, and calling that creature an environmentalist because he started up a company where he's the secretary, the president, the janitor, and everything else, called environmental progress, doesn't mean he's an environmentalist. He's the farthest thing from it. And it was Michael Schellenberg who wrote the article, not the guy who got his name on it, because that's how lobbying works. Michael puts his name out there because he got an ego that's monstrous size. Environmentalists for nuclear power. Mother for nuclear power. Environmentalists for nuclear power. In 2016, when Michael Schellenberg, along with pioneering scumbag degenerate James Hansen, we were basically excluded from polite conversations for even talking about keeping Diablo Canyon open, recalls Schellenberg. Promoting nuclear as an important tool in fighting climate change is a ludicrous assertion. On top of that, would get him dismissed by fellow environmentalists, and appropriately so, as a conspiracy theory. Well, no, not a conspiracy theory, it's fruitcake. Or falsely as a corporate shill, which is appropriate. Because that's actually what he is. He's a lobbyist. He's a nuclear lobbying group. Two moms, a scientist and an engineer, joined hands to save nuclear. If that sentence don't make you want to throw up, you got a pretty strong stomach. At the same time, two degenerate scumbags were forming an advocacy group called Scumbags for Nuclear, also known as Mothers for Nuclear. And look at them, they actually used their kid on top of that to try to trick and deceive and manipulate people so they can keep their jobs. To say their views were not widely embraced would be a serious understatement. We felt like we were on an island all by ourselves. This is nonsense. They had the nuclear industry supporting them. We had people wishing we would die. Yeah, because you're scumbags. I don't wish anybody to die, but you're scumbags. Go work at Fukushima, scumbag. Which, by the way, we got a poll tonight about those two degenerate scumbags. Should scumbags, mothers for nuclear, have to work alongside of the homeless at Fukushima nuclear meltdown? And bizarrely, 12% said no. Why, are they too good to work at another nuclear power plant? Is that what's going on? They're too good to work at Fukushima. It's okay for them to work at Diablo Canyon. Oh, no, well, don't give the homeless a day off. I think what they're doing is really telling. They're either stupid or evil. I'm going to go with evil. Said I was nervous about nuclear before I started working there. Really? They promote nuclear power on social media. They generate conversations walking around their hometowns wearing T-shirt and that say, why nuclear? Ask me. And they're going to lie and lie and lie. Claiming that it's carbon-free is absurd. It's absurd. This is the most energy-intensive thing on the planet. Carbon's good, right? Plants can't live unless there's carbon being into the environment. Insects, trees, whales, humans. If there's no carbon, the planet would be a barren wasteland. Hang on. This is a 16-day model of Fukushima radioactive fallout. This is an invisible cloud that covers the entire planet, pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second from hundreds of trillions of billions of trillions of billions of atoms pulsing energy every second for millions of years. So if this was a snowstorm covering the whole planet, this is a 16-day model. 16 days of Fukushima. Imagine if that was a snowstorm, covers the whole planet after 16 days, and snows for 1 million years. Then you get it, right? Because you got to shovel a path every day. But that's what it is, but it's a snowstorm. It's invisible, and you can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or feel it or touch it or pick it up. But the Geiger counter doesn't lie, for instance. I can only pick up gamma. I can't, and not, not alpha or beta or neutrons. It's not surprising, and I can't pronounce the names, so I'm not going to bother because it doesn't matter, that the two women support Diablo Canyon. After all, they worked there. And they acknowledge they want to keep their jobs. This is how we feel we can contribute it as environmentalists. But you're not, obviously, and you know you're not environmentalists. It's a net zero carbon, Miles Allen, which paper was used now as weaponized against the entire population of the planet to bully the entire planet. And Christine that's her inspecting the cement of the reactor building. But the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation, not the cement of the reactor building, which is hemorrhaging neutrons. But the fuel pools have no containments. See, that showing us that picture has nothing to do with the conversation. Everything runs downhill on top of that into that ocean. Nuclear power, and they're showing you a picture of Diablo Canyon is having a resurgence. What are those two pools there? I wonder. I know what those drums are. They're cast, dry cast. They're all vented into the environment. Their fuel is still splitting the atom. But what are they evaporating in those pools? They're evaporation pools. Is that where they're putting their tritiated water and letting it evaporate into the environment? I don't know. I got to look it up and see what it is one of these days. Twin energy climate crisis forcing governments around the world to take a fresh look at nuclear, which takes 12 to 15 years to get up and running. Uses up all the natural resources and precious metals on the planet each time. And are the most resource intensive. Both of them, a nuclear power plant needs 2 external power plants to supply it. To call it emission free and wrap that up in the carbon mantra, which is ludicrous, because carbon is good. Radiation fallout is the bad one. Pressures on politicians to find reliable, low carbon. Again, the word carbon, particularly since 2015 at the Paris Accord, was weaponized. It was decided they were going to weaponize those words against the population. And of course, the United Nations has 195 countries. There are 195 militaries, is why they call them the military-industrial complex. And if you don't understand that, you have to look at what they've done in North Korea in the 50s. Millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, 10 million injured. They destroyed every house in every community in the entire country. United Nations did. Now has a land, sea, and air embargo for 70 years. For 70 years. Has them reconsidering long-standing stigma surrounding nuclear power plants. So the examples they're going to use, like everybody else, is California is going to keep Diablo Canyon open. Germany is going to keep their 3 remaining nuclear plants open. And Japan is thinking about opening up more nuclear plants. So they're calling that the Renaissance. And we see these examples over and over and over each day, right? This is not a Renaissance. This is the furthest thing from a Renaissance. This is desperation. Nuclear power plant construction plunged as environmental and safety concerns grew, especially after a high-profile accident at Pennsylvania 3 Mile Island. It was the end of the nuclear renaissance in the United States in 1979. It should have been 1959 after Santa Susana melted down. Santa Susana was equal to 460. Hello, James. Just give us 1 second. We'll get you up there. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey there.
Here we go. We got you. Folks, this is James Lucid in your comments section. Hi, James.
Yeah, I just had a call in. This has been a weird day, as usual. I remember waking up, and I think the first thing that went through my mind, I think something that came through my news feed, was, of course, Princess Diana died today, 20-something years ago?
I missed that, yeah. The anniversary,
and,
yeah.
Later, and there's always been something really strange that's always lingered about Princess Diana for me, about her death specifically. It just never made any sense. I mean, I guess the thing that is obvious is about the vehicle she was in. Like, it's never had any sort of record of falling apart like it did apparently that took her life. But anyway.
Yeah, that was a strange story. Go ahead, James.
It just kind of, it's just her spirit lingers everywhere. It seems like so.
She was lovely,
today,
yeah.
I noticed this article from NPR. I get the Google news feeds, whatever, keywords and stuff. And today, this article comes out from NPR, and I just want to read just the first couple paragraphs from that.
Yeah.
It's so profound. Okay, it starts out with resistance to nuclear power. Nuclear power is starting to ebb around the world with support from a surprising group, environmentalists. This change of heart spans the globe and is being prompted by climate change, unreliable electrical grids, and fears about national security in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And it goes on and on and on about how California is reopening Diablo Canyon, and
Yep.
this remarkable turnaround. These anti-nuclear activists and these progressive democratic people are, they're all joining hands and supporting nuclear power because they just, the ebb is turned around. I mean, and then I'm thinking Princess Diana, what would she think? And I went down a rabbit hole as usual.
Yeah.
And I recall that she visited, I saw a clip today earlier in 1991. She visited a children's hospital, the victims of Chernobyl. And it was like, you think about that today, like, wow, like what? Who do we have as a world figurehead that has any sort of clout that anybody watches that would do such a thing? That would be, the Pope even today wouldn't do such a thing.
Yeah, no
right?
kidding, yeah.
We got him to go to Japan and say, yeah, nuclear's back and left, and that was profound. That was the greatest thing we got out of him. But Princess Diana, it was like she was a living angel on earth, almost. Like, or she had to have been.
Yeah, she was something, man. Yeah, she really was something, yeah.
And she cared. And so I noticed, though, when I was watching this clip, that it was an entourage of people around her. And, you think that you fear, she's got security, of course, that kind of thing. But looking at it kind of more deeply, and I realized that these people that are protecting her, they know her value. Like her charisma, the things that she comes across, all of that means so much. Okay, and so that just got me a little bit more deep, and I started looking into this more, and I find this book, this excerpt of this book from, I guess, Enemies of the State. I don't know, you can look at it. I just want to read this paragraph. There's this other woman that I think I remember Kevin Blanche talking about. Hilda Merle, does that ring a bell? She was an anti-nuclear activist back in the 70s in the UK, and she died mysteriously, like weird. It was like she.
I have to look that up.
It was Hilda Merle. Her last name was Murrell. And this is really interesting. I went down this hole because
I think I know something. Go ahead.
Let me just read this. It'll all kind of make sense. So
sure.
It's like this is out of an excerpt out of this book. The MI5's operational role will, of course, change now that the Cold War is ended. But other than that, it will be business as usual. Priority is now given to terrorists, especially the IRA, and rightfully so. But you can take it from me, the Green Brigade, along with all anti-nuclear protesters, will be investigated. Nuclear energy is a major priority, and anyone upsetting the apple cart will be dealt with accordingly. Indeed, when you consider that our own MI5 source told us that the service had received information regarding Princess Diana's planned campaign on behalf of victims of nuclear-related cancers, one wonders if she was dealt with accordingly. After all, if Hilda Merle was considered such a threat, MI5 deemed it necessary to murder her, then how big of a threat would Princess Diana have posed in challenging...
I cut you off 1 second. I've actually covered quite a few stories over the year about how ruthless that the British government were in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. They were something else. Yes, everybody, they were infiltrating any kind of groups at all, and they were getting women pregnant and everything else. The stories were horrific. The abuses. And we see that after Fukushima, the campaigns coming out of the United Kingdom, even today, still shock me. Go ahead, James. That was a great point.
No, I guess it's just that excerpt that nuclear energy is a major priority, and anyone upsetting the apple cart will be dealt with accordingly. They dealt that with you. They did that with you.
But what Diana, she was so influential that she could really, like, just with one blurb on the TV or in the media, she could really cause a lot of grief, would become recognized as a threat. And that industry unequivocally is ruthless. It's ruthless. And they would have no issues with getting rid of kings and queens if that was a threat to the industry. They have, back in the day, these were just... it's really evil when you look at their legacy, so it's not very far-fetched to imagine them doing stuff like that also, see? I never thought about it because I kind of do remember, right, that she did visit people that were affected by accidents. She did also recognize, as far as I remember, the soldiers who were irradiated in the nuclear testing at Maralinga and Christmas Island and places like that. So yeah, I gotta start looking at. Definitely gotta look up, like you don't go down the rabbit hole, and see where I end up.
I just felt like I had to call in because it just really feels like, God, if Princess Diana's spirit is anywhere, it has to be with you. It has to be with our team here.
I say so. Yeah, no, 100%. Eh?
A few people watching, but it's got to get out that way because if they were that afraid of her, that they were willing to kill Princess Diana. I mean, think about the evil.
And that's how they roll, see?
It is, but that's all. I just want to share that.
Okay, my friend, much. Love you, my friend. God bless you. You have a great night. Yeah. Okay, James. Good stuff. Folks, when you're calling in, make sure you keep your mouth on the phone because you can hear it breaking up there. So, like, I had to train myself to point myself at the mic. And for several years, I used to watch my videos to see mistakes. Because I hate the sound of my own voice. Everybody's like that, right? But I would watch my own videos, not all the time, but when I felt I didn't perform, I would watch the videos, look for the mistakes, and then correct them. And that's how we got to where I am today, through trial by fire, you know. So this was a model of the radioactive fallout of the plutonium-239 dispersion based on TEPCO's numbers. This is incredible dispersal of plutonium-239, which is the worst of the worst in plutonium isotopes. The worst isotopes are the curium isotopes. And curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium isotopes. I love calls like that, where they broach new subjects like that. Because I get caught up in the 24-hour news cycle to keep what we're doing alive, right? We included, and you know, I'll try to cover each day every story from a 24-hour news cycle on nuclear, because these are scumbags. That's why we call this the Nuclear Scumbag Show. Because the journalists or lobbyists that wrote the story and the journalists that put their names on the story, because they don't write it, these are scumbags. That was a natural thing, right? And so each day I cover a 24-hour news cycle, and if they lied in their story, then we cover it. We try to cover the lie as much as we can, or if the story was really important, right? We'll cover that part of the equation to keep. The problem is that we ended up calling it the nuclear scumbag because every story is going to be full of lies and deceit and deception. And so it's a brutal pace to do this each day. It's brutal, folks. But it's a small contribution, see, that I can play for the better of all species and humanity. And we have to protect the female species on our planet with every fiber in our bodies. And until everybody starts throwing their bodies into the clogs of this machine, I'll be here keeping the candle lit on both ends. Evacuation order lifted for part of Futaba. So it lifted the restrictions on 15% of the community. The other 85% is a no-go, no zone, no dead man zone. It's so absurd because radiation is airborne. Every time the wind blows, it releases radiation. Because a lot of radiation don't be uptaken by plants and trees and don't get sequestered into or assimilated into material or whatever, even though a lot does. So a lot of it is, what I'm saying, is readily liberated back into the environment when it's disturbed, and that's disturbing because you're talking about full body x-rays you're getting from the gammas, x-rays, neutrons, pulse and energy, and they don't mingle, so they'll all change direction. So when you got a lot of atoms together in one place floating around, because they can pulse energy 20, 30, 40 feet. So what you end up getting, think of a pool table where you break the balls originally with a really hard break, and the balls are banging off each other all over the place. That's what's going on in our environment everywhere now because of the 80 years of releases and dumping and venting and everything else and accidents. An accident is the worst case scenario where you release an absurd quantity of atoms that are floating around looking for victims, insects, birds, animals, mammals, humans. It's indiscriminate, and everything with replicating cells is the victim. Nothing has an immune system, autoimmune trigger to defend against it. Look at all the friggin' weirdos at Futaba. These people are actually weirdos. Well, not all weirdos. Some are just stupid. But a lot of them actually know the difference, and they still go there. Good slaves working for the government. Allowing people to live in a nuclear wasteland for the first time since March 2011. If you live anywhere in Japan, you live in a nuclear wasteland. The evacuation order now covers 85% of the town. I'm laughing because otherwise I'll yell, right? So what that means is 85% of the town is off limit. Can't cross the street. If you are playing baseball with a few friends, the ball goes over the fence, you can't go retrieve it. If your dog runs across the road, you can't go and bring him back. If your kid goes across the road, you're not supposed to go and bring him back. And if you bring a kid there, you should be charged with child abuse, obviously. But a lot of people are just complacent. I shouldn't use the words. When I use the word stupid, I'm talking about government employees who actually know better, but are actually stupid to put themselves in that environment where they're going to be bioaccumulating in their bodies absurd amount of radiation. Meanwhile, only 10% of the victims wish to return. Well, there has to be an incentive for people to go back to a nuclear wasteland, folks. And we've seen that a few years ago where they're offering like $20,000, $30,000 to families to move there with their children, but they had to stay there for 2 years, and the children would get a bursary and free trips to school with free backpacks and shit like that. On Tuesday, the evacuation order was removed for a reconstruction base around a train station. This is gallows laugh because it's so evil. Because when I say it, I have all these vivid pictures. That drives me crazy because I physically see things when I talk about it, and I can't articulate it a lot of the times. But that's why you see so much graphics and pictures being introduced into these presentations. Is because when I'm putting it together, it's like, how do I translate this to everybody without taking the entire night? Right? And if you've been around for a while, you know that I don't take shortcuts. I don't skip because it's difficult. Except for the tritium earlier. I screwed that up. I got to go back and do the math, take my time. But tomorrow I'll reintroduce that, a little bit of that story, and I'll just show the math again, right? So I had one number last night was 12 million pounds, or 76,000 tons or something. I got to do the numbers again because obviously I made a mistake. I didn't have the extra zero, which is a magnitude more, right? Which is a huge amount when you're talking about those numbers. You're talking about 34 million trillion. That's a huge number. Let's keep her rolling. The town will also test growing rice. Only 15% of the nuclear wasteland is open for suckers and people that are complacent and people that trust the government. And the rest is too radioactive to go get your dog back if it goes that way. But, I mean, we didn't see that yesterday or the day before in the stories, right? But all of a sudden that shows up. And because we know that on the other side of the nuclear power plant, 2 kilometers on the other side of it, is Akuma. And Akuma, they were using that as a holding site for millions of 1-ton bags of radiation. But we also know they're splitting the bags open, dumping the soil, and growing food in it. And the bags were generally for 100,000 becquerels a kilogram. You got to multiply it by 68 to get a square meter. It's a horrific number. Now the numbers they're using are based on gamma. They're not talking about alphas and neutrons and betas. They're not tallying that number into the equation. As I showed you earlier on Sunday, I think it was, that the calculations for the releases from the multiple nuclear meltdowns didn't start until the 20th, 9 days after the nuclear meltdown started. And none of the tallies include the actual inventories that were lost. And so the word betrayal doesn't really do it justice of how deceptive and deceitful and dishonest and disingenuous they were, right? Another challenge for the town is having the evacuation order lifted for areas other than the reconstruction base. Other areas, because 85% of this nuclear wasteland, thank goodness, is still off limits. But unfortunately, you can't be in the 15% that's open without being permanently harmed. And if you go there every day, the harm is just horrific. Because there's 1,800 illnesses and diseases, and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses that'll manifest before cancer. But don't worry, I'm only going to tell you 500 more times this month. The government, aka the maniacs, plan to conduct a survey of the former victims by the end of the year and launch decontamination work in 2024, 2 years down the road, on a priority basis reflecting the results of the victims' surveys. In other words, the people that moves into the 15% area, they're going to go do a survey, and then in 2 years' time, they're going to go and try to clean up whatever they were worried about. So you can live with it for another 2 years. Japantown lifts evacuation order 11 years after nuclear meltdowns. Japan's budget request stirs debt demons. They're so far in the hole now, it's absurd, isn't it? Will be funded by government bonds. In other words, vapor money. Japanese fuel fabrication plant to resume activity. Nuclear Engineering International. So anything by the World Nuclear News or Nuclear Engineering International, these are both professional lobbying groups. They'd run your kid over on the way to school, get out and go through the child's pocket for lunch money, and the kid will be there crying, "I'm dying, call an ambulance," and they'll slap the kid and roll them over and take their suckers out of their pockets, get back in their car, stick a sucker in their mouth, drive down the road singing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you, folks. They're ruthless. They don't understand good from bad. They're not capable of it, or because they can't get the job if they do. Announced that it intends to resume like Mothers for Nuclear. They're completely incompetent of reality, right? They don't have to be out doing that to keep their job. They're doing that because they're evil and they want to fit in. Announced that it intends to resume production of pressurized water reactors. This is Mitsubishi Nuclear Fuel Company is planning on making MOX fuel. A prolonged and record heat wave builds over the west this week. Now, I've seen a few people talking about that in the comments section after last night. And unfortunately, I got a CNN story. I apologize for that. It's a reprint. Some of the hottest temperatures of the year on the way for the West Coast, particularly the Americans, possibly staying dangerously hot through Labor Day as a mega heat wave. Mega heat wave was building in for the long term. It's here to stay. More than 55 million people are currently on their heat alerts. So, folks, if you're in there, please be careful. Temperatures could exceed 110 degrees Fahrenheit Well, which means you get up to 120, 130 at some people's patios or in your cars. So what I like to do is I'll take a cooler and I'll start freezing water, and I'll grab a bunch of face cloths, get them all wet, put them in plastic bags and stick them in the cooler so I can cool myself constantly, right? With fresh cloths. And lots of bottled water. And don't get lazy, right? Keep on top of it. Make sure water's always cold. You got lots of face cloths, because you just run it over your skin, and that'll help you cool down right away. Or pets, and you can use mist on the pets to spray the pets to help them cool down. They're going to have the same heat issues as you are. If you're really hot, your pet is really hot. Right? Your pet is going to suffer the same issues as you're suffering. If it's like sickening heat, that's going to be affecting your pet. Your pet can't tell you. Or your child can't tell you too. There you go. Just pour water all over yourself, Dan, for something to do. More than 100 records could fall in the West. That's why I told this story tonight. Because that's serious. That's some serious heat wave we're talking about. When you talk about breaking 100 records, that's real heat wave, folks. And they're also talking about Seattle, Portland, and Boise. These places were incredibly radioactive, and will be for millions of years after Fukushima, right? There was a huge amount of radiation found in these places, identified and quantified. The National Hurricane Center is actively watching 2 areas in the Atlantic, and because the oceans have heated up so much because of Fukushima, when the yearly hurricanes, cyclones, and typhoons go over the ocean is so hot, these things are supercells. And they're showing up on coastlines at 200 mile per hour sustained winds plus. And you don't have building codes for 200 mile per hour winds, because that's new since Fukushima. No locations for mothball Philippines nuclear power plant in 2023 budget, because the nuclear industry is actively trying to coerce the Philippines into blowing common sense and investing in idiotic small modular reactors, right? They're desperate to keep their future alive. So this story came out of us. It was a Denmark summit. Baltic nations confirmed 7-fold offshore wind energy boost at Denmark summit. 20 gigawatts, which is 20 large nuclear power plants worth of renewables by 2030. You couldn't build 20 nuclear plants by 2030, but you can do wind farms. You can do it a lot quicker than that if you actually wanted to. As they weaned themselves off Russia gas, they should build it first and then wean themselves off the gas, right? Because if not, then you got inflation, where by 2030, anybody that's left won't be able to afford electricity. And this is a ridiculous podium. These people don't deserve to be put on a pedestal like that. They absolutely unequivocally, despite the fact that it's renewable energy they're talking about, still should never be given this kind of, that goes to people's heads, right? They start hobnobbing with the wrong people now. This was a meeting between Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Sweden. All of them heavily radiated from Chernobyl and Fukushima and Santa Susana. And James called in when I was talking about Santa Susana, I think. Or I can't remember, just before that. I was talking about, and I forgot, we're talking about 3 Mile Island. And I forgot to mention, maybe there's something else that just struck me, I can't remember. But anyway, Santa Susana was equal to 460 3-mile islands melting down at the same time worth of radiation. But the media won't acknowledge it. They'll just acknowledge a 3-mile island, and barely that, right? And I done a expo on it on Sunday night, I think, where Santa Susana radiated 2 million people, and they admitted that. They claimed it was a millisieve worth of radiation, but that's not what happens. You're breathing it in. It's not a shine or a X-ray or something like that we're talking about. It is in one context, but it's actual physical atoms that you're going to inhale or consume through water, food, or other, just breathing, right? But another study claimed that it was equal to watching colored television for an extra year. And nuclear scientists told one lady it was like drinking a glass of wine or smoking a cigarette. That's how harmful the radiation was. But that's not how radiation works. Once it sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones, your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells, and eventually, over decades, would build a tumor around it. That's if you got a single atom. But if you're breathing it, drinking it, consuming it, eating it, washing your clothing in it, bathing in it all day long, you're getting serious permanent bioaccumulations. And so is your loved ones. Russia wasn't there for it. And in this war, Putin is using energy as a weapon. No, those countries said they wouldn't take Russia's gas or oil. And so by proxy, they created an inflation. Then they try to spin it and say Russia wouldn't give it to them. That's not true. That's deceitful and dishonest. And that's the problem, right? We tell this story with skyrocketing energy prices because all NATO and UN countries had an embargo against Russia right after in February, which caused and I've done a video when they announced it. I said, folks, they're going to have inflation worldwide now because of this within days. I went out and filled up all my gas tanks right away, thank goodness, because the prices skyrocketed within about 10 days. 20 gigawatts will supply electricity for 20 million people. More than the current wind offshore capacity in the whole of EU today, which is, it should have been 500 times more than that by now. Right? The renewables have been scuttled by the industry for years, so it's not competitive against the nuclear industry. Canada's a prime example. Last year, Canada closed down 700 windmills in Ontario because they were competitive against the nuclear power industry. They had restricted them, a lot of them, to only nighttime because they were saying they were killing the birds. But studies showed that they rarely killed birds unless they were put in certain areas. And if you painted them a certain color, they were killing no birds because the birds could easily see them better. The color they were given was probably by the industry to make that happen in the first place. See? And that Bruce Power in Ontario, there was a $4 billion showed up, was supposed to be for storage for wind and solar. Bruce Power, nuclear power plant, took all $4 billion. So that renewables couldn't demonstrate peak power. Therefore, because the minute that happens, all the industries will be put on notice immediately. So by 2050, the Baltic Sea's wind energy capacity could be brought up to 93 gigawatts, the country says in a statement. It said 93 gigawatts. So currently worldwide is a little under 4,800 gigawatts of coal, oil, gas, nuclear. Nuclear is, I think, around 400 gigawatts. Last year there was 330. There's 291 gigawatts of renewables came online in 12 months last year. which is equal to 333 full-size nuclear power plants coming online, but in renewable energy. Total worldwide is about 450, but a lot of them were shut down recently, right? And so between 2020 and 2026, renewable capacity will peak in that 6 years at around 4,800 gigawatts. That's equal to 5,500 large nuclear power plants in renewable electricity in just 6 years. So the nuclear industry is panicking because people are starting to appreciate what's really going on with this, right? And this is another kick in the guts for the nuclear industry you're looking at right there. Putin's attempts to blackmail us with fossil fuel is failing. He's not attempting to blackmail anybody. You guys all done a self-embargo against Russia's commodities to punish Russia. You also went out and stole rich people's yachts from Russia in order to attack Putin, Vladimir Putin. I mean, that's absurdness. That's absurd. So if you work all your life and you become wealthy, you buy a large ship. If you go to a country that doesn't like your country, should they be allowed to steal your ship? You're not the war machine. You worked hard all your life. Now, some of these were oligarchs and got their money by devious means, but the majority of the people had businesses, hotels and supermarkets and football teams and whatever. European Commission president, but you're setting a precedence by doing that. What's to stop a country from doing it to you when you show up there on vacation in the future? European Commission president. So we're getting rid of the dependency on fossil fuel. You're supposed to do that before you cause massive inflation in your country. What they done was on purpose. It was part of the World Economic Forum. Vladimir Putin was part of that. Justin Trudeau was part of that. Angela Merkel was part of that. Many current, former, and future so-called leaders. We really should get rid of leaders. And I mean, when you look at what leaders have done by the stroke of a pen without the consent of their country is horrific. Boris Johnson, with a shake of a hand at a G7 meeting in front of the worlds of idiot media, lifted all restrictions on United Kingdom's embargoes against Fukushima's 14 prefectures of irradiated food. Without no scientific consensus, because there is none, there is no true scientific consensus that could justify importing food from a nuclear wasteland. This is, again, what I do here 5 days a week, and I work 7 days a week, but what I do here 5 days a week is, common sense. Here's some common sense. Have a nice day. And somebody has to do this, and there's a million people can do a better job than I could ever do, but they won't do it. And of course, eventually, if you keep doing it, you're going to get pretty good at it. And unfortunately, I'm still doing it. And fortunately, I'm still doing it, maybe. But unfortunately for Dana, I can't do the other things that are necessary. But at least I can come out and kick the industry in the nuts each day doing this. To those who are aware and tuned into this subject, you come to the appreciation. This is the most important story in human history, is the nuclear industry. Certainly Fukushima, but the nuclear industry, every facet of it is deviant. There's nothing normal about this industry. Its entire legacy is predicated upon deceit and deception. And their children will get the education to get the job to do the deceit and deception. That's evilness. Ministry of Economy, no scenario for nuclear power plant stretch operations in a stress test. And farms as far as you can see. This is Germany coming out saying there is no scenario for an extension of nuclear power plants. Nor was any scenario calculated with the aim of paving the way for any continued operation of a nuclear power plant. So, you see every 2, 3, 4 stories are saying Germany's going to keep nuclear. And that's part of the Renaissance, right? And every 5th story on that particular subject will be from Germany saying, that's not true. Stop saying that. It's not true. We have no intentions of keeping the nuclear plants open. Denmark intends to import a lot of their wind energy in a few years into Germany, by the way. Nuclear waste import, when the unwanted gets wanted. Governments spend billions of dollars to dispose of nuclear waste within their territories. Well, no, they don't. There is no repository. There's temporary holding sites, typically where it's produced. And everything is vented into your community 24 hours a day. When I say that, what it means is if you live within 100 kilometers of a nuclear power plant, you can't avoid getting sick from it. You can't escape the radioactive fallout. You only need one exposure to eventually get sick from it in increments over time, by the way. But to live in the environment, to bioaccumulate it on a regular basis, or even worse, raise a family, within 15 miles of a nuclear plant, there was 6 times more breast cancer. Within 15 miles of a nuclear power plant, there's a significant increase in Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. And there's 1,800 illnesses, not just cancer. And there's a huge increase in cancer. Debilitating illnesses will manifest long before the cancer, unfortunately. So what he's trying to do with this story is justify shipping waste to other countries. And so France and United Kingdom are notorious, and Russia are 3 notorious countries that will do that. But what they'll do is they'll reclaim hot particles from fuel, and then they ship the rest of it back to the country that shipped it to them. It's so idiotic and it's so dangerous, it defies any logic whatsoever. It's just evil. So what I'm talking about is mixed oxide fuel, MOX fuel. MOX fuel is where you take hot particles, fission particles, from missiles and used fuel. So originally, when the fuel comes out of the reactor, it's described as 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. 2 billion times more toxic. But that really doesn't do it justice, see? So if I take 5 gallons of Fukushima radioactive water at 2.2 sieverts of beta per liter, I take 5 gallons of it, put it in a 5-gallon jerry can. I bring it to I use a remote control vehicle to do all this. I bring it to a subway, and I leave it by the stairs at the subway. Everybody who walks past that 5 gallons will die that day, or that week at the latest. And it'll do that for 1 million years. So to call it 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison industrial poison won't poison people over and over and over with the same dose, see? But radiation will. When it's in your trees, your plants, your food, and everywhere else, then the only solution is to educate the population not to be victims and to hold them accountable ultimately. Some nations even import nuclear waste to fund how they deal with it, like United Kingdom. And how much money did they make doing it? Let me see. by splitting the atoms. It's something like 600 million euros to pollute the Arctic and the Atlantic Ocean. The whole story is just, when it comes to the British, they're exceptionally evil. They excel in being evil. The British universities excel in, also the schools of mass destruction also excel in being evil. EU plans to give 5.5 million iodine tablets to Ukraine, which ain't going to protect you. You have to move out of harm's way. What that means is a shelter in the place, see? Stay there in the hot zone and suck it up all day, every day. If you're getting iodine tablets because of a potential nuclear accident in your area, you are in the wrong area, folks. You're being poisoned anyway. And you can't stop the iodine from sequestering in your muscles, your organs, and your bones. And the iodine tablets, it's not going to stop cesium and other gamma emitters from sequestering in your thyroid, which will also take enough of it, and you end up with anthropogenic man-made, you end up having mutated hormones being produced. And your pituitary gland will store that, by the way. Huge section. That's like the worst case scenario times infinity. That is nuclear. Alleged preparation for continued operation nuclear power plant in Germany is nonsense. So a girl begs a scholarship to work in the nuclear science. And the poor thing is probably brutalized where she's too, and that's her escape. But she ends up hurting millions of people down the road. Permanently. U.S. nuclear near miss could have killed thousands. This is a messed up story. South Dakota, Rapid City, around 40,000 people. That there was an accident that went decades without knowing how close they come to death. They dropped a nuclear weapon. The nuclear weapon was 1.2 megatons. So Hiroshima was 15 kilotons, which means that was 80 times more powerful. That was equal to 80 Hiroshima bombs. Would have been an 11-mile kill ratio. It would have killed tens of thousands. So there would have been a thermal heat wave, heat radiation of 11.5 kilometers. But the radioactive fallout would have been equal to 80 Hiroshima bombs going off at the same time. So it would have poisoned water for hundreds and hundreds of miles, and every animal and every creature and every species. A 1.35 mile fireball. So it would have evaporated tens of millions of people, atomized and aerosoled, ionized and radiated that, and released that into the environment to go around the planet and radiate people, which happened after Hiroshima and Nagasaki too, by the way, where humans were actually expelled at over 1,000 miles per hour, thrown through buildings and everything else. Around 100,000 were atomized and aerosoled and ionized and radiated. And so their atoms floated around the planet looking for victims. Like the ice cores worldwide showed significant numbers of fallout from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which meant that people worldwide died or got ill and sick from ingesting atoms from irradiated people and animals and children and everything else. Pretty close. Boris set to sign off on his $30 billion nuclear power station, which is Sizewell C, I think. I can't remember. Hang on. Yeah, because they got two, right? Boris the monster. Drinking alleged Fukushima peach juice to trick the population of the United Kingdom to be complacent for food from a nuclear wasteland. Real nice guy. He's thought to privately decide to go ahead with a nuclear plant the week before he steps down. So, see, what he done by lifting all restrictions from a nuclear wasteland goes down in the history books as probably one of the most evilest things to happen to the United Kingdom. It's what he done is evil. He's filling up the supermarkets, and by proxies, the victims of the countries have cupboards and fridges with food from multiple nuclear meltdowns, from ruthless Japan, from heartless Japan. Japan is heartless, right? What they done and continue to do, that's heartless. That's evil. The very definition of evil is shipping food from a multiple nuclear wasteland. That's actually evil. We're going to get through it. That statement is revolting. Construction starts on the next Chernobyl, floating Chernobyl. The first one that Russia built was a decrepit barge where they had to use second-hand parts for reactors, used reactor parts, to build a reactor on the barge. And the media for about a year was calling it a small modular reactor. But a small modular reactor is supposed to fit on the back of a pickup truck or a transport truck. And this was a massive barge. These were huge reactors that are now, in the case of an event, would melt down where? Right through the barge into the ocean. The whole story is insane. That's Russia. And here's the World Nuclear News, which is a nuclear lobbying group, promoting Russia. Why every other country has an embargo against it. But Russia's not building it. The stuff, they're too busy being monsters. They're going to get stupid China to build it, which is a horrific thought, because China might build some on their own once they learn to do that. Because the nuclear industry in China is pretty evil, man. The atomic calf, that's an incredible video that everybody should have in their collection. It was released on YouTube by a company that bought the copyright to it. And the movie is created from propaganda films to counter the propaganda films. It shows you the propaganda and then gives you the proper perspective. It's a very, very unusual video, right? It's an exceptionally unusual video because there's a lot of honesty into it. That's really rare. Lord knows that's rare. Life magazine ran blueprints for fallout shelters. Blueprints. Build your own fallout shelters. So did popular Scumbags Mechanics. And Estes Kefauver barnstormed the nation with warnings about strontium-90 in the milk supply. They collected teat from babies in the United Kingdom, for instance, and there wasn't a single baby whose teeth wasn't polluted with plutonium from Sellafield and Donneray. In one scene, girls in home EC classes displayed their canned goods designed for nuclear survival. Children in school being taught to put cans in your fallout shelter. The industry has been so insane for so long, it's normal, but it's not, see? But to them, it's normal. We no longer hear much about the possibility because the propagandists are busy convincing us of something else entirely. And we know what that is. Like Fukushima didn't happen. And small modular reactors will fit up in everybody's bum eventually. And we'll all be nuclear powered. Nobody will ever have to sleep or eat again. We'll all have a nuclear reactor in our bellies. France doubles down on nuclear. Giants call for electricity market overhaul. France doubles down on nuclear. France, with 32 of their 56 reactors offline, and the other reactors are going to have to come offline because they're going to have the corrosion problems because they built them all at the same time. And the government built them. And everybody knows if the government builds it, it comes back and haunts you forever. That story is absurd. France doubles down on nuclear when nuclear has just stabbed the whole country over and over, and for years to come. That is the strangest thing imaginable. They got to come out and show their solidarity despite the idiocracy of it. It's like a guy who goes into a bear den, the bear beats the shit out of him, chews him up, breaks a bunch of bones. He goes to the hospital. As soon as he gets out, he runs back to the bear den and climbs back in there and gets chewed up and spit out. Barely survives it. When he gets out of the hospital, he heads back to the bear den again, kicks the bear in the balls. The bear jumps up, fucking mauls him. That's what France is doing, right? Like, in all honesty, France... You know, they irradiated every human, every species on Christmas on the French Polynesian Islands. They went to Niger because Niger had super rich uranium mines. And what they done there was they caused a civil war that's still ongoing 60 odd years later. And they destroyed the whole country permanently. Destroyed the government, got rid of it. They gave weapons to fractions outside the country on the borders. So it was a constant civil war. So they can get their hands on cheap uranium for their nuclear renaissance. That never goes into the cost of nuclear. Bikini Islands has 1 million square kilometers permanently irradiated. That's a 2019 study. 1 million square kilometers. 1 million square kilometers of the ocean. Of these, like, you know, Christmas Island and the French Polynesian Islands and the Marshall Islands, these were paradises. These were just spectacular oases. And the nuclear industry done everything it can to destroy them permanently. And these are nurseries too for the oceans. The nuclear industry actually atomized islands and disappeared them. Because they couldn't get away with it on land because it was so evil. And so they said, we go where nobody can complain, out on these islands where nobody can stop us. And the amount of evilness that goes into this, like when you understand the nuances and the details and the minutiae of the minutiae, the implications, like for me personally, are just... You'd have to do a whole show just to articulate how evil it is. And even then, you can only barely scratch the evilness of it. The Ukrainian nuclear power plant is kindling for World War III. So the fact that any country had done that, which was unthinkable, right? The fact that they actually done that and jeopardized the entire planet and continue to do it is just too much to bear, folks. Every day, these headlines, you know, I'm waiting to see the headline. There's no doubt they've had releases. They managed to hide it, that's all. But there is no doubt that they would have had major releases. U.S. put millions towards nuclear recycling projects. So why are you showing us a fusion reactor? Because that's a fusion reactor. That got nothing to do with nuclear fission. They're investing $36 million. $36 million is almost irrelevant when it comes to the nuclear industry. That doesn't even cover the bottom of the bag they have every day. But it's a significant number because there's 11 projects. Because it never stops. This drives me nuts all the time when I see money allocated to all these new companies and corporations, huge amounts of money. Recycling is a core strategy for the R&D team, which is illegal in America and Canada, by the way. And using artificial intelligence and physics-based simulation methods develop durable waste forms that significantly reduce the repository's burden from molten salt reactors. That's pretty telling. They're promoting the molten salt reactors, which are the ones that melt it down at most of the national laboratories in America and Canada at Chalk River. Like Savannah River Site, Los Alamos National Laboratory, Idaho National Laboratory, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories, Oak Ridge National Laboratories, WIP, Chalk River. That's just a few. These are disaster sites. Some of these are thousands of square kilometers. Most of them are hundreds and hundreds minimum. And they've released so much legacy radiation into the environment and what I mean by legacy is stuff from, back in the Manhattan era, where there was zero checks and balances. Which means, okay, so we'll finish up in this one. We're calling it Idaho National Laboratory. Developing an innovative and simple process for recycling metals fuels, which is just more money being thrown at that. Some of these facilities, right, where they got 900 employees on cancer benefits, and another 900 employees with cancer but were denied at just a single facility. So imagine how many haven't been employed or would have died. So they're talking about making mixed oxide fuel, which is basically illegal in America, but some of these places are able to get licenses, what they call temporary licenses, that keep getting extended forever. For recycling metal fuels, mixed oxide fuel is what they're talking about. Oaklow is studying economic and let me go back for a second. Yeah, we're talking about compacting waste for repositories. So basically what they're talking about is so they can fit more waste into the repository. And WIP done that a couple of years ago. So what they done was they calculated the drums and barrels and boxes they brought in, and they accounted. Now they said, well, the box and the barrels and the drums take up this volume of just material, right? So that's not nuclear waste, but it is because it's bombarded with neutrons from interiors, see? So it actually is nuclear waste. But there was empty spots at the top of it. That was calculated, and then that was extracted from the total sum so they could put more down in the hole. That's yellow accounting. That's disingenuous and deceptive and deceitful and dishonest on a good day. And so Oklo was studying economic viability of a state-of-the-art used nuclear fuel recycling facility. So you can see where they're going with that money, can't you? So all of them are going to play that same part. They might not get anywhere with it because they're notorious for taking the money and not... Like, the industry it spends more money than you can wrap your mind around on academic studies. It's shocking, really. In North America, each year there's around 4.3 million academic studies produced. At the taxpayers' expenses, I might add. And they're put behind a paywall for Elsevier, Springer, and Wiley, which owns 22,000 of the biggest journals on the planet, the most influential. And around 16 of them contacted me after expeditions to try to get me to publish in their journals. But these were, the backside of 22,000 journals owned by the three biggest. So they wanted the information themselves and the documentation. But the worry, of course, was it goes beyond a firewall and nobody got access to it. And I didn't publish with them. And I was bombarded with offers to publish. But I published it up at my site where it's free for everybody on the planet to download and turn into documentaries. There's no copyright on it. And nobody did, of course. The new facility will convert, but it's there for everybody because you're not going to go up there and do the research, right? You're not going to go up there and spend months and months and months, year after year, to do the research and document it. So I did, and so there's the evidence. And I provide GPSs each day, multiple. Everywhere I went, I would shoot 5-10 pictures of the GPS. So we had a guaranteed perfect GPS numbers at the end of the day when we published it on my site. That's the idea of my site. It's free for everybody. Same with these presentations. These are free. You can put them on DVDs and sell them. I don't care. They're free. It's a public service, right? That's what I do. And you, right? Because you support me. And, if people don't have faith in me after all of these years about all the massive, endless research expeditions, around 600 radio interviews, there's so much. It's hard to wrap your mind around that we have accomplished over the last decade, for instance. There's just this incredible, humongous amount of documentation that quashes the industries. We'll just call it a night here, maybe. Pick up there tomorrow night. Nuclear was always a cleaner option. That's such a scumbag, the guy who wrote that story. I can't pick up there. What about this one? I'll ask nuclear engineering talking about NuScale. And NuScale, of course, you're talking about small modular reactors that don't exist. And they're actually on the stock market with reactors that don't even exist. So when it comes to Ponzi scam, pretty hard to beat the nuclear industry, right? Well, there's the end of it right there. So we'll pick up where we left off last night, which is right around here, I think. Scumbags, mothers, and we got a poll there tonight. We'll call it a night right here. We got a poll we're going to go in and look at here in a second. I want to get that one there. Evil mothers for mass murder. So let's get up that poll. Should mothers for nuclear have to work alongside of the homeless at the Fukushima nuclear meltdown? We got 56 votes. And I only got 4 thumbs up in the last 22 hours of my last video, so we're being censored. And the same with the video before that, by the way. 91% of the people says, yeah. If they think nuclear is harmless, go down to Fukushima and work with the homeless. So they won't, see? Because they're not stupid. They're just scumbags. And this is the Nuclear Scumbag Show, where we showcase these degenerate human trash. I never get sick of that. I'll be sitting here setting up the show. Every once in a while I'll go up and start playing that, let it play in the background. So today when I was playing it, I started playing the closing song. It's cool, eh? Anyway, let's say goodnight to everybody. I didn't do it last night. I was just falling asleep. It was a long day yesterday, my goodness. Where are we to? I'll turn that off here. And we'll close the poll. I have to bring up the poll one more time. Should Mothers for Nuclear have to work alongside of the homeless at the Fukushima nuclear meltdowns? Well, I mean, they're working at a nuclear power plant. Why not go to Fukushima and show everybody? Why would that be a bad idea? Yeah, they're going to get sick and die, but they're scumbags, so it doesn't really matter. It's nuclear. Better them than the homeless. They had a decent life, good jobs. It's okay for them to die at Fukushima. The homeless never had nothing. They don't deserve to die. Because they're out there walking around. When people ask them about nuclear, this is what they say. So how is that not a scumbag? So last shot of that, 56 votes, 91% said, yep. Them some serious scumbags, Dana. Good job. Starlight, Snakes and Doggies. Dana Nasana, thank you again, Dana. Richard, Nirad, Uloft. Good night, everybody. James Lucid, thanks for the call, my friend. Appreciate it. Kevin Blanche. We'll call Kevin tomorrow night, actually, on the show. See how things are going his side. Everybody have a great night tonight, a great day tomorrow. Keep her rolling here. I'm just going to scan up through the name. Quick shout out to anybody I spot. Patrick. Hi, Patrick. Easy. I know Ed's out there somewhere. Who's else have we got here? Peaceware. This is good for my eyes too when I do this each night. I know Colette S is out there somewhere. Swanee D will be along tomorrow. I know I've seen Stephen Young there earlier. Stephen Young donated $50 last night. And that was pretty awesome. I didn't check to see if anybody donated today. And we're actually going to use that 50 for the boat, put fuel in the boat. And I'll probably lug the boat down tomorrow, I guess, and stick some fuel in it. Or maybe I'll wait till the part shows up, I suppose, on Friday. Hopefully it shows up early. We're going to be on the water. I'll be streaming live from the water on Saturday and Sunday if everything goes reasonable. It's supposed to rain, but I got a roof. Thinker. Cleveland Marco. Angel's Place. Hello, everybody. Sandra Churchill. Hi, Sandra. Another Gmail. I always like seeing everybody. But I understand a lot of people don't comment, so hugs for all of you folks out there. God bless every one of you. Hugs for every one of you. Darlene. Hi, everyone. Albert. Hi, Albert. We made it through another night, another hardcore show tonight, folks. And, how long are they going to be able to live in that radioactive hell? Asks the stinker. I got no idea what's going to happen there. A lot of people won't be able to live there that long because you're in the nuclear wasteland, the worst one imaginable. I'll read everything later tonight or tomorrow morning, one or the other. It's strange because I work hard all day and I'm conditioned, right? And then I'll do the show and then it's like I'm drained. It's really something. It's like I've been lifting weights for 2 hours. And at the end of the show, it just... My body literally tries to go into shutdown, but I'm jacked up on adrenaline because I just pounded through 24 hours of work and got to get ready to do it again for tomorrow night. I was going to do a fundraiser tomorrow, but I'm just not capable of it. I'm just too burnt out, and I got to do another show for tomorrow night, which should be a show by proxy about birds and whales and stuff like that. And so we might just run in that tomorrow night. We got a bunch more gathered up. And because I'm going on in the ocean, I might as well have that conversation for the last show of the week, because that's Thursday's show, right? We do 5 days a week starting on... It's good to see Stephen Young, because we know how hard it is to recover from a bad illness, right? Robert? Did I get everybody? I'll come back to the most recent comments in a moment. Any second, rather. Obsolete optics. Okay, Shane O'Brien. Hi, Shane. John Shiflett. Hi, John. That's it. Yeah, tomorrow's show is going to be a great show, James, for sure. Let's do a show on... It's absurd how much material I got. And so we're going to do a show on the ocean tomorrow night. And I'll dig up a bunch of videos that you probably haven't seen from expeditions and stuff like that, and lots of headlines from after Fukushima, and then also I got a lot of recent headlines to cover anyway. And so, yeah, let's do that tomorrow night. That'll be a great show, because we're going to... that'll psych me up for on Saturday when I go out on the ocean to try out the engine, because we got the parts. Or I shouldn't say, right, because we've seen how Amazon could be late by several days before, and they were supposed to be here on Monday, the parts, and they changed it on the weekend to this coming Friday. I went down tonight, supper time, I checked the mailbox. Come on, get here early for a change. And no luck. And so there is 2 links at the bottom of the description where you can donate to me. And my front page, there's at the top of the page where videos and playlists are to, you see another one that says shop, so you can buy merchandise. And the 2 links at the very bottom of the description are only 2 ways you can donate. One is PayPal directly to my account, and the other one's to my website. You'll see a list of credit cards and everything else from around the world that you can use to donate with. This is a huge banking system. I have no say over any of that. And we've never had an issue with anybody in all these years. And so even $10 helps, folks. It adds up if enough people does it, and we can accomplish things. And we got to raise money because we're running out of time this year, and it's been a screwed up year. And I'm getting research in. No matter what the odds are, it's going to happen. Hugs for everybody. God bless everybody. Have a great night. Even better day tomorrow. We'll see everybody for the last show of the week tomorrow night. And it'll be there for when you get around to it. If not, have a great night. Great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great one, folks. If you made it this far, don't forget, give us a thumbs up, okay?